Welcome to our last mini lecture in regards to Jesus' final days, his last days in Jerusalem, leading up to the cross, his resurrection, and eventually the ascension. There are many appearances that Jesus does and shows himself after his death and ultimately his resurrection from the tomb. So when we look at the last 8 days, it's leading up to some of the great Easter reminders as we celebrate the Good Friday events, the Passover supper, and those particular things. So let's move ahead on this mini lecture and hope you will find some value that you can take away with as you end the course. So the last days in Jerusalem begins on Sunday. It's Palm Sunday, his triumphal entry. It's a fulfillment of Zechariah chapter 9 with Jesus coming on the foal of a donkey. There is great celebration in this event. You have people rejoicing, spreading out palm branches, and I'm just delighted that Jesus is the Messiah. And then quickly, the accolades and the praises begin to turn as the trials ensue in the days ahead in this week. At this time, the disciples go and secure a room for the fellowship of the Passover time. And this is when Jesus is also in the upper room, beginning to discuss his final days prior to the cross. And so this leads us then to Monday as Jesus begins to move toward Jerusalem, and you have the cursing and cleansing, and goes into the temple and cleanses, sends the money changers out. And this would be the second time Jesus does this. And then you have the cursing of the fig tree. Jesus walks by a fig tree. He has a short discussion and teaching moment with the disciples. And even the disciples come back and find that the fig tree has withered because it's without fruit. And so this is very symbolic. The connection is found that Jerusalem is without fruit, is not bearing fruit. It's not following after the Messiah. And so the fig tree equals Israel. On Tuesday, again, the fig tree revisited. You have the debate over authority. You have the questions over the tribute's money in Luke chapter 20. You have the questions about the resurrection and what is to be looked forward to. You have the questions in regards to the son of David, who he is. Does Jesus fulfill that? And then ultimately you have the final Christ denouncing the religious leader, the Pharisees, and that includes the Sadducees as well, but namely the Pharisees and their legalist views. And he calls them whitewashed tombs and tells people to not follow after their ways. Finally, in these last days in Jerusalem, you also have the Olivet Discourse in Matthew chapter 24. These are the time where the disciples come and ask Jesus some questions, 4 questions to be exact. What will the temple, when will the temple be destroyed? What will be the sign of that destruction? What will be the sign of your coming, Lord? When will you be coming back? And what will be the sign of the finality of the end of time? And then Jesus gives the answers. There's the period of tribulation. There's the abomination of desolation that unfolds. You may also want to look at Revelation chapter 6 and its seal, the seal being exposed at that point, and also Daniel chapter 7 and 9 and Ezekiel 34 to 39. That seems to be the fulfillment of these final events that Jesus discusses with his disciples. In the last days of Jerusalem, you have the preparation of the death of Christ. He's preparing his disciples for this end in mind. You have, at this point, Peter, the encounter with Peter and his denial. You have Judas betraying Christ. So all this is happening in these last days in Jerusalem. So Peter and John prepare the Passover meal. You have the upper room discourse. And you have the way finally to Gethsemane, where he is praying. He's asking his Father to take the cup away, that it would pass from him. And finally, on Friday, you have him entering into the Garden of Gethsemane. There's great struggle at this point, and then eventually this leads to the trials, both 3 trials for the Jewish segment and 3 trials for the Roman segment. So altogether 6 trials that Jesus has to endure during his time of crucifixion. One of the major events in his last days in Jerusalem would be, of course, the cross, his death. But during his crucifixion is the 7 sayings that occurred during this moment of great suffering. You have, Father, forgive them, found in Luke. Today you'll be with me in paradise, mentioned to the thief on the cross. You have, woman, behold your son. That's found in John. And telling Mary, here's John, the Apostle John, who would be the one to take care of you. My God, why have you forsaken me? Matthew and Mark. I thirst, John. It is finished, found in John. And then finally, Father, into your hands is found in Luke. You have events during the death of Christ. When I talk about events, we're talking about the earthquake, the tearing of the curtain. We have tombs are opened up. These are great events during the time of Christ's death. And then finally, you have the burial of Christ in John chapter 19. You have the people watching at the tomb, watching to see whether he would rise again, and also those who are watching him from the Roman side, the individuals who were stationed there to protect the tomb from the Jewish or even the disciples gathering the body. And then finally, the Sunday is Resurrection Day. All 4 Gospels mention it. You have the ascension of Christ in Luke chapter 4:24 and Acts 1. And these are great concern for Luke's memoirs or story in convincing Theophilus concerning the person of Jesus Christ. One of the special features as we think about the course and the many appearances that Jesus shows himself, I give you 11 different sightings. I left off, and I did that on purpose, the appearance that Jesus has with the Apostle Paul or Saul on the road to Damascus. But at this point, we're just focusing on the 11 appearances and their timetable and their sequential period of time leading up all the way to the 40 days of his ascension. And you can read these on your own and gather some observation from each of these events that each of the biblical gospel writers leave for us. Well, that ends our mini lecture on the last days leading up to Jesus' death and his resurrection and final ascension, and even the great commission of sending out his followers into the ends of the earth to preach the gospel of the kingdom of God. I hope you enjoyed the course. I hope you were able to gather some insight from the different mini lectures. Also, the reading content was meant for comprehension as well. You've received Mark Strauss's book. That's a good resource to keep. I wouldn't sell it by any means. And you should be finishing your final details of your homework and projects and reading assignments. And coming to the end of the course is a good, successful for you. And I pray your God's blessing on you as you move forward in your studies in the days ahead.